Week 5 of the fantasy baseball season, and here's a few hitters I look to buy and trade for this week. The first guy, Kyle Schwarber of the Philadelphia Phillies. So Schwarber, a big offseason signing here for the Philadelphia Phillies. And so far, he's been off to a slow start. 7 home runs, 16 RBIs, 16 runs scored, 2 stolen bases, a 185 average, and a 285 on base. So right here, the batting average is way down for Kyle Schwarber, even though we know in his career he's not a great batting average guy. But the power is still pretty decent on the season with Schwarber, with 7 home runs so far. Right now, I've said this in previous videos, the power and the batting averages around the league are way down this season so far. And I think it has something to do maybe with the changes to the baseball once again, or with the hitters not getting their timing down with a short spring training. With Kyle Schwarber, we know he's one of the best power hitters in the game. The batting average is going to go up, and he plays in a ballpark, obviously, in Philadelphia, which is one of the smallest parks in the league. So once the weather starts warming up even more here, I think he's going to break out. And obviously, we saw last season, this guy could carry your fantasy team for a couple months here. So the last few games here for Schwarber: May 4th versus Texas, 1 for 3. May 5th versus the Mets, 1 for 4 with 2 runs. May 8th in a doubleheader versus the Mets, 3 for 8 with a run and a stolen base. May 9th at Seattle, 0 for 5. May 10th at Seattle, 0 for 4. May 11th at Seattle, 0 for 4. So right here, he's in the slump, like I mentioned. For his last 13, but he's a guy that definitely can bounce back as Schwarber. He's too good of a hitter. He's got too much power, and he plays in a good ballpark with a good lineup. So right now, while the batting average is down and the power is mediocre so far this season, where this guy still get finished with 35, 40 home runs, in my opinion, he's a guy who will go out there and get it. I don't think you really have to break the bank at all to get him with these early season struggles. The next guy is Austin Riley of the Atlanta Braves. So Riley had a monster breakout season last year with Atlanta. 33 homers, 107 RBIs with a 303 batting average. And so far this season, 7 homers, 14 RBIs, 16 runs scored, a 239 average, and a 341 on base. So he's shown some signs, obviously, is Riley. But the last couple weeks is where he's taken a downfall, only hitting 188 with 3 homers and 5 RBIs in that time. So Riley, we know he's a great player. We know he's a former top prospect in the Braves system. And last season, I don't think it was a fluke at all for Austin Riley. He's just too good of a hitter, and he's going to get going. This Atlanta Braves team out of the gate, they've been slow so far this season, but we're only 32 games in. So I think by June, a lot of these big-time hitters are going to break out and get things going. And this is the perfect time to trade for some of these guys on this list here before they start going off and it's too late to get them at small value. The last few games here for Riley: May 3rd at the Mets in a doubleheader, 1 for 7. May 4th at the Mets, 1 for 5 with a run. May 6th versus the Brewers, 0 for 3. May 7th versus the Brewers, 0 for 3 with a run. May 8th versus the Brewers, 0 for 5. May 10th versus Boston, 0 for 3 with a run. And May 11th versus Boston, 1 for 3. So right here, he's been pressing a lot. Is Riley striking out 10 times in the last 5 games. I think he's swinging for the fences a little bit too much so far this season. After last season, like I mentioned, he hit the 33 homers, but last year he did have a lot of strikeouts as well, with 168 Ks in 590 at-bats. But Riley, he's going to be fine. He's one of the better players on this Atlanta team, and he's a guy that I think is going to have a monster next few months here once this weather gets going and the Braves get things right, like last season where they started off slow but still won the World Series, obviously. The next guy, Dansby Swanson of the same Atlanta Brave team. So Swanson, he's off to a horrid start on the season. 2 home runs, 10 RBIs, 16 runs scored, 4 stolen bases, 226 average, and a 303 on base. So right here, the on base is pretty good. The average is low, and the 42 strikeouts is a lot so far in 106 at-bats here. But the last couple weeks, he's starting to find the holes here, Swanson, and getting the hits, hitting 286 in the last 2 weeks here. But right now, the power is down a little. Last season, 27 home runs for Swanson and a 248 average. But right here, I still think he's a talented shortstop, and he's going to be a guy that's going to go through slumps but get it going. But I think when it's all said and done this season, we could see 20 and 80, 20 and 90 here for Swanson with a 250, 260 average. The last few games here for him: May 4th at the Mets, 2 for 3, 2 runs and a rib. May 6th versus Milwaukee, 1 for 3 with a homer and an RBI. May 7th versus Milwaukee, 0 for 3. May 8th versus Milwaukee, 2 for 3 with 3 runs. May 10th versus Boston, 0 for 4. And May 11th versus Boston, 0 for 3, a run and a stolen bases. Swanson, at least he's stealing some bases even though he's struggling mightily so far. And shortstop, we know, is a weak position in fantasy baseball. So right here, like I mentioned, this Brave team, their lineup is just not right now. Olsen ain't hitting, Ozuna ain't hitting, Swanson and Riley ain't hitting. But once these guys turn it on and get it going, this team's going to be very dangerous. And they're going to be big fantasy guys. No doubt about it. So Swanson right now, while he's struggling, he's another guy you don't have to give up much at all, I think, to get on your roster. And I would go out there and get him now before it's too late and he has the breakout, which I think's coming around the corner because he's starting to find the holes. Like I mentioned, the next guy's Jose Abreu of the Chicago White Sox. He's been on and off this list a few times already here in the first few weeks of the season. So Abreu on the season, 3 home runs, 12 RBIs, 15 runs scored, a .217 average, and a .294 on base. So Jose Abreu, we know he's a second-half guy, arguably most of his career. And right now, he's just off to the slow start. And this White Sox team got off to a slow start early in the season. But right now, they've won 6 out of the last 7 ball games. So the last few games here for Abreu, May 4th at the Cubs, 2 for 4 with a homer and RBI, 2 runs scored. May 6th at Boston, 1 for 4 with a rib. May 7th at Boston, 2 for 5, a run and an RBI. May 8th at Boston, 1 for 4 with 2 RBIs. May 9th versus Cleveland, 0 for 6. And May 10th versus Cleveland, 0 for 4. So right here, he's in a slump. No doubt about it. 1 for his last 14 is Abreu. But he's a guy that could get right quickly, in my opinion here. And this White Sox team, like I mentioned, they still got to find themselves, even though they've been heating up of late. And Jose Abreu, I don't think he's going to lose it that quick from last season to this season, where last year 30 and 117. So this year, he's off to the slow start. But throughout his career, he's been a second-half player. And he's still putting the ball in play a decent amount, striking out only 21 times in 106 at-bats. So Abreu, he's going to get right. He's going to find the holes. And with the weather warming up in Chicago as well, here coming up with June soon, that ball's going to start flying out of the ballpark. And he's a guy that could have the monster second half and always an MVP candidate as well. So right now, while he's doing nothing is Abreu, I would go out there and get him. And he could be one of the biggest trade pieces to get on your roster this season. And the 5th and final guy I look to buy and trade for this week here is Josh Donaldson of the New York Yankees. So Donaldson off to a very slow start with his new team here in New York. 2 home runs, 7 RBIs, 10 runs scored, a .215 average, but a .342 on base percentage, which is very solid with a low batting average like that. So Donaldson, he's always been a guy that works the count, always gets on base at a decent clip, and always a good power hitter as well. Just this season, the power is down, but with that short porch in left field in Yankee Stadium, and the smaller ballparks as well in that division. Tampa's pretty small. Boston, obviously, you just got to get it over the monster. And Toronto, that ball really flies out, and Camden Yards as well. So right here, Donaldson, I think he's going to get right. He's still getting adjusted here with this Yankee team. And this Yankee team even hitting the baseball. Some of their guys have been off the slow starts besides Aaron Judge and Anthony Rizzo. But besides that, everyone else has low batting averages. And Donaldson, he's too good of a player, I think, even though I know he's at 37 years old, not to get it going, especially with these talented hitters in this lineup. May 3rd at Toronto, 1 for 5 with a run and a rib. May 4th at Toronto, 1 for 3. Then a couple rainouts. May 8th in a doubleheader versus Texas, 1 for 4. May 9th versus Texas, 1 for 3. And May 10th versus Toronto, 0 for 2. So right now, Yankees, they got a 4-game set coming up at Chicago. And in White Sox Stadium there, good hitters ballpark. And I think Donaldson could get right. It takes only a few games for this guy to really heat up with the power ball. And he's going to get going. He's too good of a hitter, like I mentioned. He's in too good of a lineup. And also, he's a guy right in the middle of that lineup, batting 5th of late here for this Yankee team. That's going to get going. So Donaldson right now, I don't think you got to give up much at all to get him. And he's actually only owned in 68% of fantasy leagues, which is surprising. Teams have given up on him early in the season. So that's a few hitters I look to buy and trade for here for week 5 of the fantasy baseball season.